Hello. Hi and welcome back to another video on this channel. Thanks for joining me today. And today we're going to talk about something that you might have or might have not seen on YouTube. That was such bad grammar. But anyway, the title of this video is going to be I Do Not Dream of Labor. And I'm sure this is a title that a lot of people have been seeing on their YouTube feeds. I've seen this sort of idea and this sort of concept slowly gaining momentum on this platform, and well, I'm guilty as charged. I've been watching so much of these types of videos, largely fueled by the fact that I myself am in somewhat of a tight situation when it comes to my employment and just work in general. Now, I just wanted to add on to the conversation, but also add some books. So this is going to be a reading list as well for anyone that might be interested in picking up some books about the topic. And so I'll be covering not just books on labor and the history of labor and work, but also books on anti-capitalism, some resources on how to better understand the way that structures are set up, and also maybe moving forward some of the things that we can do in this climate. I don't even know. Let's just talk a little bit more about the concept of I do not dream of labor. Now, I do see a pattern amongst the videos I've watched, and these people generally come from a university educated background, who have sort of bought into hustle culture quite a bit, who have been brought up to enter the so-called generic 8 to 5, 9 to 5 office corporate trajectory. And I want to say that it's pretty interesting to see this disillusionment coming through a lot stronger. And I'm also kind of in that situation, although I am in Singapore. And to give some context, I mean, I did grow up in a much more like elite school background. I did get a gifted education program, which is kind of disgusting when I think about it. But because of this education that I've gotten, I was able to accumulate an interest in literature and in reading. And I also was able to find a pathway into like a university track that I actually enjoyed and learned a lot from. And I want to say this quite clearly, that this really comes with a lot of privilege, because like I do not have to worry about having to get immediate wages and money to support my family, because my parents have sort of saved enough for their own own expenses. And what I have to do is really just work for myself. I just want to reinforce the fact that in Singapore, education is really streamlined from a very young age. And I don't know whether you've ever heard about the Singaporean education system. There's so much international media about how it's doing so well and it's a great model, but I want to tell you that there's also a huge flip side to that. There's a lot of there's so much competition here. Kids are under huge stress. Mental health is really on the decline, and really it's just a really hyper competitive and hyper individualist society here in Singapore. And I think that really was something that I was so ingrained in me growing up, that I was of a certain category of people that should be working certain types of jobs. And I was even in a classroom where people would make jokes about how the country's next political leaders would be in that classroom, or that they'll go on to lead major companies and corporations, which is super like problematic, because like that just shows that nepotism was at play and not really meritocracy, because these people, their parents or their relatives, were already in high positions. So kind of crazy when I think about it. It's for me like my family migrated here, so it's not like I have connections here. And a lot of the things that my siblings had to do was to navigate the education by ourselves, the education system. So that's where I'm coming from, and I would say that a lot of this awakening comes from this particular group of people who, you know, have been very comfortably living their lives, and now that they're in a certain positions, start to question the systems that have propped them up. And I would say this is a good development, because I sincerely believe that how systems of inequality are in place are to keep the people who benefit from the systems like blind to the system. So I do think it's a good thing that nowadays people are a lot more aware of the inherent inequalities. But okay, that's rambling too much about myself. I really want to emphasize that capitalism is, as the major economic model in which we run today, is really reaching its last few stages, and I find this to be a scary thing, but also a really pivotal moment in which now we can start to build interclass solidarity and to start to empower one another. And I really say this because, like, growing up, so much has been taught to me that I must do my best to provide for myself. There was no concept of mutual aid. There was no concept of redistributing wealth. The only way forward was like up. I was supposed to outcompete my classmates. I was supposed to get into a better corporation. I was supposed to climb the ranks, and eventually I was supposed to get married and have children and then pass on those privileges to my children. So that was the narrative that I was born and raised with, which I would say a lot of people are, because for my own decision not to carry on this kind of intergenerational mindset, I've become a lot more open to the idea of mutual aid, and open to the idea that, isn't it kind of selfish to be so hyper individualistic? And I'm still unlearning a lot of this. Let me just get into the books and the reading list. And so I've divided the books into a few categories. I've divided it into books on work and labor, and then books on capitalism and the sort of different effects of capitalism, and also afterwards some books that might give some solutions or help to clarify what we can do moving forward. So the first book I want to recommend, or at least what really changed my mind about a lot of things, is Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber. This book is pretty well known. I think a lot of people have read it and really changed their minds about what constitutes like meaningful work, or what even the workforce has come to. This is basically David Graeber's take on the way that the workforce has evolved into something that just perpetuates like meaningless work, basically like bullshit jobs. There's a lot of work that's meaningful that it's not, properly compensated in terms of money, but instead a lot of their labor is exploited, and there's just all these different anecdotes about how people with high paying jobs don't see the value of what they're doing. It really changed my mind about what I was going into as this like middle class university educated individual. It really opened my eyes to that whole system of underpaid labor and overpaid labor, actually. So that's the first book I want to recommend. And the second book I want to recommend is Work, A History of How We Spend Our Time by James Suzman. This is an anthropological take on the history of work. Today, when we talk about the economy and we talk about jobs, we talk about them as though they're so unmovable, but the reality is that the history of work has always been so fluid and changing, and it's only been the past 100 years or so that capitalism was the main form of economy that we rely on. Having this historical overview, big picture idea would really help in seeing that capitalism is just one small segment of human history, and that it can end if we choose to end it, if you know what I mean. After that, I want to recommend this book called Less is More: How Degrowth Will Save the World by Jason Hickel. Now, this is a more of a contemporary work. The idea of growth in itself, when we talk about growth, is just so unsustainable. And nowadays, with climate change and with, so much political instability, but it's really a question of like whether our current economic model really works for us, and that the model of growth is not, it just doesn't make sense anymore. I do think that when we are critiquing society today, a lot of people will be like, oh, but capitalism did this for us, it did this, it did that. How can you say it doesn't work? And I think whenever we critique society, we critique it out of the fact that yes, it's always a constant negotiation of what has worked and what is currently not working and what models we can move towards to make things better. And this is always an ongoing process. Just because something worked 10 years ago, or dare I say like 100 years ago, doesn't always mean it's going to work in the next 10 years or the next 50 years or the next 100 years. And this goes for everything. So everything is just always a constant state of negotiation. I wanted to make this video a bit more fun, but I realized I'm sounding really serious in this video, but let me try to be a bit more candid about capitalism. I just also really wanted to highlight that capitalism is not just inequality across classes. I also want to reinforce the fact that capitalism also disproportionately affects people of different genders and of different races. And there are many books that talk about this as well. There's this zine that really taught me a lot. It's called Racial Capitalism in the Prison, Abolition zine. And you can just search it up. I'll put a link down in my description box. But also, when I was studying about South Asia last time, when I was studying anthropology in school, there was this book that I came across called High-Tech Housewives, Indian IT Workers, Gendered Labor and Transmigration by Amy Bhatt. And this book is a very specific niche topic, but it talks about the wives of those who were able to migrate to the US for the tech industry. But these wives were on a specific visa. So I think it's like the HB1 visa or the H4 visa. And this visa doesn't really allow for their formal employment in the sector. So what turns out is that a lot of these women are actually as highly qualified as their husbands and migrated to the US in search of better job opportunities, but in the end they are unable to work these jobs. This book talks about that allows for the continual migration of these skilled workers into the US. And it's really because of these women who are doing these types of invisible labor that you can see such a sustained cycle of migration. But these women are the ones that are in the most precarious positions, because even when they come back to India, their employment histories will also put them at a disadvantage. So this was the book that I found really spoke to the gendered differences in terms of capitalism and how women are still expected to prop up a lot of this invisible labor in order to keep the money going, in order to keep the workforce going. And this is also evident in Singapore as well. There's this book called Neoliberal Morality in Singapore that Youyenn wrote that also did talk a little bit about the unsaid expectations of women to still fulfill all the domestic duties while being a full-time employed person in the workforce. So, and because of all this, society still continues on, but these women are heavily disadvantaged because of this additional labor that they have to perform. That is about the fact that yes, it's racialized and it's gendered. And talking about capitalism and the effects on other areas in our life, I really want to highlight Naomi Klein's books in terms of capitalism versus democracy, as well as climate change. So Naomi Klein did do a book called This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate, where she really outlines how capitalistic tendencies has really been a huge detriment to the environment. Not just that, there's another book called The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism, in which Naomi Klein also highlights how capitalists take advantage of the aftermath of natural disasters in order to make quick buck from, struggling economies. Thanks for staying till the middle of this video. I hope that was not too boring. A lot of these books, I do think that it's the first step in understanding the big picture of things. Now, let's get to the hopeful part. What can we do? You do not dream of labor. I do not dream of labor. I do not want to see people being paid like shit for the work that they do. I don't want to see CEOs getting hundreds and hundreds of percents of revenue every year, even though in a freaking pandemic. So what can we do? Honestly, I don't have the perfect solution for you. But from what I've seen in other videos, a lot of content creators, they do say that it starts with unlearning, and hopefully with the books that I've talked about, that would help. I myself am trying to find solutions, and I see this a lot in radical publishing, because these are the people who are willing to imagine how things would look like. So you can check out a lot of indie publishers if they're talking about such topics. For me, I'm also currently reading this book called How to Be Anti-Capitalist in the 21st Century by Erik, Olin, Wright, and I'm learning quite a lot about the ways that you can resist capitalism that start from smaller acts of resistance. There is a lot of hope out there. You just have to search for it. And what's most important is to build up our interclass solidarity. And so for me in the middle class, it's also about convincing my other middle class peers to really think about these topics and to contribute to things like mutual aid, and to contribute to things like understanding in unequal systems and structures. So if you're new to all of this, I want to invite you to question your own upbringing a little bit as well. For example, were you taught that hard work equals success? Were you taught that certain people are better suited for certain jobs, and that they don't deserve to be in certain positions? Were you taught that certain jobs are much more valuable? Maybe jobs like the CEO, or jobs that require you to sit in an office, jobs that require some kind of cognitive skills, while other jobs also taught to you to be much more undervalued. Jobs that face people, customer facing people, jobs that are physical work, manual labor. What were the things that were taught to you? Were you taught to compete your classmates? Were you taught not to engage with the neighbors across the street? All these things, I do think that they all have some kind of relation to the way that we have grown up in this very capitalistic society. I also want to question the structure that makes us feel like we have to monetize everything in our lives, or makes us feel like we have to hate each other to get some kind of moral reward. I really want to question that as well, because I see a lot of people, having negative comments about people who are trying to make money doing different things, whatever. But instead, we should be focusing those energies towards boycotting huge corporations, and also not just unlearning and starting to think more about solidarity and mutual aid. There's also a lot to learn about how to live outside, or beyond a capitalistic society. And this also means learning about self-sufficiency. This also means learning community organizing that's bottom up and not necessarily top down. And I'm still really new to this. I think these are all the ideas that I'm kind of soaking up and trying to understand. There's also this Instagram infographic that has been super helpful for me when it comes to thinking about mutual aid, and about redistributing the money that you earn from the job that you're working. And I'll link that down below as well. Thanks so much for staying to the end of this video. I hope it was helpful. I do think that there is an increasing number of people who are becoming so disillusioned with the economic model that we live in today. And honestly, I have never studied economics, but I can tell that people are really so unfairly treated, and that there is a way out as long as we actually get together collectively and stop giving power. As long as we stop giving power to these ideas and beliefs, and we start to believe instead in helping one another, in empowering one another outside of this, like to get out of this like really unequal structure. And I think that's where the real change will begin. There's this book by Rebecca Solnit that I'm currently reading, Hope in the Dark, Untold Histories and Wild Possibilities. And it talks about social movements across history that have resulted, from this gradual accumulation of different efforts on all fronts by people from all sorts of backgrounds. It's not just, individuals that happen to make a really riveting speech. It's really about a society and a community that have been slowly exposed to these ideas, and then someone, happened to provide that turning point for everyone to be public and to be open about these ideas. And so hopefully what I'm doing here is to add to that discussion, or to add to that wave of ideas that I've been witnessing online as well as in person with my friends. And I hope these books really help you in that journey as well. Thanks so much really for watching till the end, and I really hope that this capitalism thing can go away. Like I'm honestly really sick of the fact that I just want to be a barista and serve coffee, but everyone's just dissing me for it. I like serving drinks. Oh, in case you didn't know, I'm working as a barista. That is my current employment status. And yeah, my parents are kind of disappointed in me, but it's okay. If you watched all the end, do leave down like a stock exchange emoji or something, or anything related to money, and let me know what other books about capitalism or about labor that you've read that I didn't mention in this video or in the description box as well. So thanks so much, and I hope that you're having a great day. If not, I do hope that you have a good night's rest tonight, and that tomorrow will be a better day for you. So thanks so much, and see you in the next video. Bye.